Hey guys, welcome back to your channel. This is your host Maverick, bringing to you Vinland Saga episode 7. So, last episode, we learned a little bit more about Thorfinn, what he's actually doing nowadays, mostly following Ashglad and his men and trying to prove himself on the battlefield, right? I did say that I wish we could see a little bit more interaction between Ashglad and Thorfinn to see how exactly their relationship dynamic works, because that's very intriguing to me, considering that one is Thorfinn is swearing to eventually kill Ashlat, and yet still listening to his orders, and presumably Ashlat also giving him some advice on how to actually survive on the battlefield. Maybe not. I don't know. That's why I want to see, right? In terms of the actual historical context of this point of history we're now in, first of all, like last episode, I mentioned a lot of the stuff that they're saying is still mostly historically accurate. I can't really find any big fault to say of it, except for maybe Forkbeard's fighting style, which, I mean, again, it's an anime, right? And we're also nearing the time when King Sweyn Forkbeard is actually going to make his big invasion into England, which he will eventually nearly conquer all, to be succeeded by his son King Canute the Great. I believe within universe time we're still a few years off, so potentially there's another time skip, or I guess we'll learn what Thorfinn is up to during these few years leading up to that invasion. I'm pretty sure that they're gonna show the actual invasion within the anime. That's like a very huge event, right? So, anyways, let's just find out together right now. Okay, let's begin in 3, 2, 1, play. It's quite nice having a historical based series. I feel like I'm back in school.
デンマーク軍およびバイキングによる侵攻は激化の一途をたどっていた。
Alright. Oh shit. It's a time skip. I do believe that this is literally around the time of
そして
Sweyn Forkbeard's invasion.
10年にわたって継続された攻撃は転換点を迎える。
Ah, here we go! We're gonna actually meet King Sweyn.
から兵を引かれると。引くのではない。休めるのだ。冬の行軍は兵力を浪費する。
Is this it?
した軍にも兵器を養わせよ。その通り。
Where's this?
来年夏に大攻勢をかける。
Oh, he certainly looks ominous there.
陣頭に立つ。
There we go. His actual invasion. Okay, this is neat.
海に帰りて。海賊連中もなしだな。今年も稼げると思ったのによ。正規の兵が動かねえんじゃ。これだから雇われ。
How are you so fat, dude?
どうするつもりだアシュラッドは。アシュラッド、このまま冬を越すのはちと寂しくねえか。めぼしい村は平らげちまったしよ。だよな。どうする。こうするもこうするも。渡り鳥と一緒さ。餌のあるところに移動。
Okay, so he's gonna go off on raids on his own. So... Oh, damn. Kingdom of France? Okay. Battering ram? Okay. I didn't expect us to see the French as well. And I guess the Normans? Franks and Normans? Hey, we even got some Pavelasses on the battlefield. Nice. Are they? Well, to be fair, the Vikings did raid alongside uh, the French coast as well. I believe they even laid siege to Paris before. So we now see an even older Forfin. Okay, this is interesting. This is interesting. How are they going to take a actual fortification? Alright, let me skip this real quick. I'll see you guys in a second. And back. Normans. That's a that's a fairly long message. And probably much more, right? Like, a few years have passed. One head weapon. So have they been constantly dealing these past few years as well? Really? Okay. This. Meaning, in France during this time, they did occupy the, I believe it's called the Duchy of Normandy. Okay. Okay. You know, this is an interesting period of time in France as well. As is evidenced here, it's fairly fragmented, decentralized, the king really has not much power. And it's mostly just local nobility for themselves. You might want to look in. They've already captured the fort, haven't they? Oh, nice. Even slingers as well. Okay. What exactly are they gonna try to do? Okay, so now they're coming. So what exactly was the delay? The battering ram? Okay. No, wait, what? What? Are they using the ship as a battering ram? Oh my god. I don't even know what to say. And of course, this guy's off to assassinate the enemy leader. What? Hmm. This is certainly an interesting kind. I thought that was a moat, but looks. They got crossbow man. Oh. Damn. Just fucking shoot him. Oh, seriously. Going up against men in full mail. Oh my god. Ah, there's his head. Yeah, he needs the head as proof. Against formations? Wow. Well. Is he actually gonna pay up though? They want to turn on them? Well, kind of makes sense. But they're gone already? Yeah, they're probably gone already. They took their payment. Ash, dude. Okay. Okay, now he. Okay. I wonder how many times he's done this over these few years. It's been what, like 5? 5 years now? 6? Dude, there's a time and place for everything, poor thing. Ah. There's the dragon again. Okay, this is seriously ridiculous. Well, what can I say? Okay. Definitely an interesting episode. Alrighty, I'll see you guys in a second. And there we go, episode 7. Yet another very interesting episode in terms of its historical roots, if you will. So let's just start off by talking about some of that stuff there, right? So from the very beginning of the episode, we know it's the year 1012. We see here King Sweyn Forkbeard is preparing his actual invasion, his personal invasion into England. This is what's eventually going to allow him to become the king of England, only to later, lose it again and then be retained again by his eventual successor, Canute the Great, right? So that is a part that I'm really looking forward to, actually, because it is a part of history that tends to get overlooked a little bit, especially since, you know, when we're talking about 11th century England, typically the most important battle or event, if you will, is the Battle of Hastings in 1066, and for good reason as well, right? But that tends to overshadow lots of other things that happened leading up to that. So yeah, looking forward to seeing King Sweyn Forkbeard as well as his son King Canute the Great, because at this pacing, right, Sweyn Forkbeard is probably not going to live for too much longer, let's just say. So yeah, there's that part, and then we get to see the, you know, Ashklad and his men invade into France, right? Modern day France. This is, I guess this is more of a bit of trivia. It doesn't really have direct relation with what the latter story, I'm assuming, because I don't think we're going to be revisiting this place in the future. But again, just a little bit of trivia. So, France, I guess we should start talking about this period of France by first mentioning the Carolingian Empire, right? And especially King Charlemagne. So once King Charlemagne died, first of all, he was a great king, he was a great emperor. But once he died, his empire was fragmented into three parts, right? The East, the West, and Middle Francia. And these later on had their own problems. They dissolved, they reformed, and yada yada yada. And eventually, well, the kingdom of France, if you will, did unite under, like, there's still one central king. That is true, but the king's power is actually very very limited, right? It's mostly the powerful nobles under the king at that time who were the ones who really had the power, right? The various the various dukes of the various duchies of France at that time, such as, you know, such as the Duchy of Normandy, which is where, you know, the title of this episode sort of comes from, right? Northmen. So during, you know, a few hundred years past, the Vikings, or at least a branch of it, did invade into France and eventually settle into what is nowadays known as Normandy, right? And at the time would become the Duchy of Normandy. So that represents sort of like Viking influence onto the mainland Europe. And again, the Duchy of Normandy is just one of lots of different duchies. I believe there's also the Duchy of Brittany, the Duchy of Lorraine, and, you know, about maybe 10 or so duchies that made up France at that moment, and they all had their own, like, power was super fragmented, right? And that's why we get situations as we see within this episode where it's really a case of, you know, a local fort or whatnot taking care of itself, because things were quite chaotic during that time. And there were lots of regional disputes, lots of feudal disputes, you know, this is my land, this is your land, no, that is my land, you know, those kinds of things, right? And so we get into a lot of these kinds of local fighting, civil war, if you will. Ashlad and his men mentioned the Franks are fighting amongst themselves, and that is absolutely true, because all these various duchies, they had their own alliances and enemies and their own agendas as well, and they fought against each other constantly, since the king didn't really have enough central authority to keep them in reign, right? So we get to the kind of situation that we see here, and I guess we can talk a little bit about the portrayal of siege in France, if you will. So I did like a lot of the things that they portrayed here, including the use of pavises, the use of battering rams, and the use of crossbows, right? So crossbows, this is about the time when they rose into prominence again, especially in mainland Europe, not so much in England. Of course, we all know the trope of English longbowmen, although that is actually true. They did prefer longbows over crossbows at that time. Now, for France, and especially for these sort of local communities, crossbows were like a match made in heaven, right? Because you got a lot of these local communities, these local forts that needed to defend for themselves in these times of unrest, if you will. So you have to understand that attacking forces always have the advantage because they can choose which place they want to attack, right? You can't really have, even if your duchy or your kingdom or whatever is strong and you have a strong army, right? You can't exactly, have the army in every place at every time, and also you can't have a big standing army because, well, that's just a waste of resources and gold and wealth and whatnot, right? So it falls onto these local communities, these local fortifications, to defend for themselves. And crossbows are a great use for this kind of defensive positioning because, well, they're first of all, they're fairly effective, and they don't require much training. So even local militia, they don't really need to. You don't need to put in all the hours that you would need to put for operating a longbow, for instance. So crossbows represent a cheap and effective method to gain considerable firepower without much money or much time. And so I did like the portrayal here, and they were mostly used on defense during this time as well. So you could see that with the attacking forces, they still mostly relied on longbows instead of on crossbows. So I did like that portrayal as well. What else? I'm not really sure about the entire historical accuracy part of literally raising all their boats and then charging into battle, and then putting it, essentially hauling it uphill, upstream, and then into the river. Okay, I guess. I'm not gonna question that part. It does make for fun viewing. Same for Thorfinn and him, basically jumping over the entire river or moat or whatever it is, and then climbing the battlements and basically assassinating the enemy captain with a bunch of soldiers surrounding him, right? Like I said, it's okay. It's anime. It's fiction. It's action. We gotta have some kind of these superhero feats. And the same thing also. I feel like also pertains to Ashclad and his men once they actually landed and were fighting against the actual soldiers of this fortification. Now, granted, I don't quite know if this is just just local militia or are they actually really well trained regular garrison soldiers. Although for this kind of situation, it would be more likely the case of it just being some local militia. Their armor and whatnot, decking out in full mail armor, that's not something that normal peasants or just normal militia is able to afford. Full mail armor is actually quite expensive to have. So that actually leads more to me believing this is a local garrison, and those are actually professionally trained soldiers. Now, if that was the case, however, I question the authenticity of just 100 Viking warriors and being able to wreak havoc and completely take over a fort by themselves, even if they came from behind, right? We saw clearly that these defenders, they were trained in battle. They know how to fight in formation and whatnot. And again, it's hard for me to believe that just a ragtag group of mercenaries would be able to go up against this kind of professional trained soldiers. Vikings, even though they're very feared for their raids and whatnot, and they're deemed as this unstoppable force, part of their unstoppableness is because they, you can't really predict where they raid from, right? Where they land, it's really only some local militia that's there to stop them. And these, against people like the Vikings who normally train for battle and who, the entire purpose of a Viking is to raid and to go on battles, it would make sense that they would quickly overwhelm the defenders. Going up against a professional army, however, that has never been the strong suit of the Vikings. Even if you did want to say that, okay, the Viking army is also strong, that is still in the organized sense, right? Organized formations, their shield walls, their spear walls and whatnot. Not exactly this kind of individualistic fighting style that we're seeing from Ashclad and his men. So a bit more iffy here, but again, I guess this is poetic license for the anime to make it interesting and also to let us understand how strong of a group Ashclad and his men are. So, yeah, I think that about covers all the historical stuff that I want to talk about this episode. In terms of the actual episode, though, like the character interactions and whatnot, it's really light. I can't really put a place put my finger on, you know, Thorfinn, and still his relation with Askeladd and his men, it's still kind of a mystery to me, right? You would think that by following them all these years, he might have at least somewhat bonded with Askeladd and his other men or whatnot. At the very least, Ashlad's men seem to care for Thorfinn in some sort of way. Askeladd at this point probably still considers him just part of an, you know, just an expendable asset, right? But I'm sure that he thinks that way out of all his men to a certain degree, right? That's just his, you know, that's just his style, right? It's a very logical way, a very calculating way of looking at things. And has Askeladd and Thorfinn been dueling all these different years? You know, each time he has a request of Thorfinn, and then once he completes it, maybe he accepts his duel or whatnot, or is this actually his first duel, the first duel between the two for quite a while now? You know, it's not exactly clear what exactly is the case, so I can't really, you know, make any comment or observation on this part as of yet. So I guess next episode we'll just see if actually Askeladd finally agrees to this duel with Thorfinn. You know, have they been doing this for all this time, or is this actually a big event, and then we're gonna actually see how much exactly Thorfinn has grown over these years. And also, I'm really looking forward, again, like I said, to the actual invasion of England by King Sweyn Forkbeard. Again, this is not something that you normally see portrayed within a lot of historical media or whatnot, right? Again, the Battle of Hastings normally take precedence. And oh, and so I guess something that I forgot to mention, right? The Duchy of Normandy eventually, you know, one of the most famous dukes of Normandy would be William the Conqueror, who eventually, you know, defeated the Anglo-Saxons at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, and made England become under Norman rule, right? And which eventually led to its very complicated relationship between the entirety of French Empire, whatever you want to call it, the Kingdom of French, whatever you want to call it, you know, that this kind of relationship between these two. So there we go. It all comes full around again. Normandy, the Normans, Duchy of Normandy, Duke of Normandy, William the Conqueror, all the way back to England, which at that time, I think I kind of forgot about this. Was actually the king of the Anglo-Saxons at that time a direct descendant of King Canute? I'm gonna have to refresh on that actually, but so I'll refresh on that, or maybe some of you guys, if you are also more well versed in history, can let me know. Anyways, that's been my review of Vinland Saga episode 7. I'll see you guys next week as well. Stay tuned. Bye bye.